I am a woman. How do I know that? I have 2 X chromosomes. When I was a young girl, after a hard-fought battle, Title IX was ensconced in federal civil rights law. And that law really broke open opportunities for women, especially to have their own separate categories to compete in sports. Who would have thought that 51 years later, we would have intelligent adults claiming that they don't know what a woman is? Yet that's exactly what happened in committee hearing on this bill, and it certainly didn't come from me. This bill idea came to me last session simply because I had a parent who was seeing this happen, albeit remotely, in various places, and said, "Representative, what are you going to do to protect my daughter?" And I thought that was a fair question. His daughter's an active soccer player, and he wants to make sure she has the best safety options possible. So I moved forward with the legislation, and it's interesting because we began seeing it in this nation with more frequency. As I started to explore this issue in our state, I found it occurring in adult competitive running and in adult women's bicycling. And those women came and testified. They were spitting mad because they had trained, they had worked, and they were being moved off the podium by biological males in this state. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the interesting thing is it never goes the other way. Never goes the other way. Permission to read from a printed document.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last session, we heard from former senior counsel to the Assistant Secretary for the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Education. And she testified, quote, "Federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in education programs or activities receiving federal finance prohibits sex discrimination, not gender identity." She further stated that aptly, Wisconsin's Governor Tony Evers said, "My message to Wisconsin transgender kids and students today is simple. I see you. You are welcome, you are wanted, and you belong." And they are, and they do. And I would say I agree with that. Transgender students are entitled to enjoy all aspects of American education in the same way students of every race, creed, sex, color, national origin, religion do. But they do not belong in spaces where the law has spoken unambiguously on distinct, long-standing protections for women and girls within the field of competitive sports. In the hearings on this bill and the next one we will hear, I presented scientifically proven information demonstrating the immutable characteristics that males continue to hold even after hormone treatment, which hormone treatment is basically what WIAA and NCAA use to determine that someone can play on a team that is different from their sex. And in fact, you'll find this interesting. A 10-year study using Air Force members for comparison showed that after 2 years of gender-affirming hormones, biological males still held an advantage against women in sports. Nearly a 10% advantage, in fact. I said to my staff when we decided to reintroduce this time, so much has changed in the 2 years since I originally introduced this legislation. When I originally introduced this, nobody had heard of a Leah Thomas or a Riley Gaines. It wasn't as pervasive as it is now. And since that time, there have been injuries to women, often that end their hopes of being involved in sports. Talk about exclusion. It's excluded some of these females. One, most recently, down in North Carolina, Peyton McNabb suffered such a severe injury playing against a trans volleyball player. She had head and neck injuries. She is still partially paralyzed. She has vision impairment and recurrent headaches because of this. And now she can't play. This happened at the high school level. Now she can't play going to the college level. We should be concerned about that. And what's so interesting is in the hearings, our friends on the other team here never refuted those facts. As today on the floor, we heard about bullying. And, this overwhelming testimony. Well, I will tell you, my constituents and people who have come to me from this issue, and I will tell you, I had a woman from Green Bay get a hold of me after these bills were heard and thanked me for standing up for this. And said, please don't give up the fight. We need you. But people are afraid to come out and make their voices heard because they don't want to be laughed at, mocked, sneered at, hissed at, beat up on social media like I have been, because I'm standing for the biological fact that women are different from men. We heard about mental health today, too, and I share those concerns. But nobody ever talks about the mental health of biological women. Paula Scanlon came in and testified on the college level bill that we'll hear next. She was on the same swim team with Leah Thomas and talked about what it did to her being a sexual assault survivor. Trans athletes may not be copious, but we have lots of sexual assault survivors in this state. And to be subjected to having to share a locker room with Leah was traumatizing to her. And then they were bullied by the coaches and the staff at the college, saying they were the problem, and if they didn't like it, they had to go find somewhere else to change or use a locker room or a shower. This is so sad because there's a fair, peaceable way to solve this problem. And, it's funny because shortly after I introduced this legislation last time, the Boston Marathon adopted this exact policy. They have male categories, female categories, and a non-binary category where people can enter. So is that hateful? I don't think anyone would call that hateful. This legislation does that too. It's compassionate. And it is not anti-trans. And I'll tell you why it's not anti-trans. If it were, there would be no third category. This is pro-woman legislation. And offering that is not an attempt to cancel or hate or eliminate trans people. The left is saying that, not us. I have people who are in the LGBTQ LGBTQ community that I am related to and I love too. And in fact, they're kind of embarrassed that they get grouped in with people defending this. So, Mr. Speaker, I say enough with the injuries, enough with the unfair competition, enough with the hate towards typical people who just want to preserve their place in settled law. The vote is green.